So we'll start. Actually, it would have been good to take this part after those seminars about virus was done. But anyway, since we are taking the online class and those seminars will happen later, uh, that information about virus is not really essential to this part. So I will proceed with this topic where we are going to discuss about two aspects in relation to virus. First thing is that how do viruses reproduce? And second thing is how is the cultivation of the virus done? So what happens is that normally when we talk about bacteria, we know that bacteria reproduce and they multiply by the process of cell division. However, when it comes to viruses, this is not true. They are not able to replicate like other bacterial organisms or like fungi, and therefore there is no question of cell division in case of the virus. Now, another thing about viruses, if you remember when we discussed in the introduction part in the beginning, it was that viruses are called as obligate parasites, right? So, when we say that they are obligate parasites, then we mean that they cannot exist independently and they are only going to be there um, from they can only survive when they are in another organism, so either in the bacteria or in the human host. That is the way in which they survive. So what happens is that that factor makes this reproduction of the viruses completely different. So when a virus has to replicate, when it has to reproduce, the reproduction of viruses is called as replication of virus. So that will happen within a host cell. So when that reproduction happens also, it's not as if now in case of bacterial cell, we have the situation that there is one mother cell and that splits up into daughter cells. But in case of viruses, this is not how the reproduction happens. What happens rather is that the individual components of the virus are separately produced. If you look at this picture on your right side, then it shows how these particular structures, the whether it is the genetic material or it is the external coating of the protein, whether it is the internal part of the organelles, all that the components get produced separately and then together they are assembled to create new viral particles. Now, another thing about these viruses is that they are very specific with respect to which host they are going to attach to. So, if the host has particular glycoproteins on the cell surface, then these viruses will be able to attach to that particular host cell. Like, and this receptor sensitivity, it varies across viruses. Now some viruses, they can attach to any type of glycoprotein or they can attach to any type of protein. Like that, their broad range of attachment is possible. But certain viruses like the rabies virus, it has a very narrow range that only if a specific particular glycoprotein is present on the host cell, it will attach to those cells. So like this, the virus needs to attach to a living cell, and then in that living cell it will be replicated. On its own it cannot exist, and on its own it cannot replicate. So generally whenever this virus gets attached to a host, it enters into a host cell, there are four possible outcomes that can happen. The first thing is called as destruction. So when we say destruction, what we mean is that the virus will enter into the host, it will multiply, and it will completely destroy the host cell. So that is one major kind of interaction. Once the virus multiply and it destroys the host cell, then this virus rapidly enters and takes control of that entire organism. The second possibility is that the what is called as abortion of the virus. The virus is not, that host cell is so strong in its defense system that it does not allow the virus to take hold only. So the virus gets eliminated from that host cell, and therefore there is no viral infection that occurs. So that cell does not get affected at all. So the implantation, the insertion, or the entry of the virus itself has been aborted. It is not living anymore. The virus is killed and eliminated. That is the second possibility. The third possibility is what is called as latency, that the viral material enters into the cell, into the host cell, but it does not multiply immediately. It does not cause any kind of destruction also. What it does is that it survives. It does not undergo any change physically, but it just remains silently inside that host cell. So this is called as the dormant or latent state of that virus. So in the first instance, we saw the virus entered, it was active, it multiplied, it underwent replication, it destroyed the host cell, and it took over. In the second type of mechanism, we saw that the virus was not allowed to take hold on the host cell. It is completely eliminated, it is destroyed. So there is no infection. In the first case, there was infection. In the second case, no infection. The third is where somebody, that host cell, inside the host cell, the virus is there, and that person is silently, that host is carrying that virus, but it is just quiet and dormant. At some later time, when the conditions become such that the immunity of that particular host cell is reduced, then that virus will manifest itself. This is kind of like what in normal terrorist and all this, security, armed forces terminology, they call something. You must have heard of this concept of sleeper cell, that some person enters into the enemy thing like a spy, and he's just quietly there and doing all things. But when the time is apt, then through that person, you can strike them. Like that, this virus behaves like a dormant, latent state. That is what we call as latency. And the fourth possibility is that the virus survives, but it does not actually destroy the host cell. Rather, it undergoes some kind of a dramatic change in its nature. And because of that transformation which that virus has brought about, this normal cell, it is not destroyed. Rather, the normal cell gets converted into a cancerous cell. This is called as transformation. So whenever there is a virus host interaction, any of these four is possible. From our point of view, what we need to study mainly is the first kind of situation, and the third one, destruction and latency. These are the ones that we are going to talk about. When the virus is eliminated from the host cell, there is no question of any other change there. And if it moves into a cancerous cell, then that's a totally different mechanism, which is beyond the scope of our syllabus. So we don't need to touch that. But what we are going to look at is how viruses can destroy host cells, and how sometimes viruses stay within the cells, and at some other time, they cause destruction. So what happens now? We need to look at how exactly does the viral replication take place. So first stage of the multiplication is when the virus has to gain entry into the host cell. So this viral particle, which has come from a bacteriophage, I think you understand the meaning of the word bacteriophage. It is a bacterial cell into which the virus has penetrated. Now it is trying to gain entry into another host cell, like let us say human host cell. So what happens is that on the virus surface, there are proteins which are present. On the host cell's plasma membrane, there are glycoprotein receptors which are there. So there is a strong attachment, a strong binding between the proteins on the viral coating and the glycoprotein receptors on the host's plasma membrane. So this attachment takes place. What you can look under this diagram under 1. Then in the second stage, what happens is once it has attached there, that leads to the process called as endocytosis or fusion. So that viral cell now, it merges and enters into the host cell. There are certain cytoplasmic vacuoles which are there, and they get fused with this virus which has entered. Then there is some kind of an acidification reaction, and that triggers the removal of the capsid, which is the outer covering around the viral cell. And because of that, that viral nucleocapsid, the virus's nuclear material, gets released into the cytosol. So if you look at these diagrams, I think it is a little more clear what is happening. In the first stage of attachment, the proteins on the viral surface bind to the receptors on the plasma membrane of the host. Once this has happened, there are certain chemical changes which are triggered, because of which next there is a process of endocytosis, by which that virus is able to get entry into the cell. Once it enters there, then its genetic material gets released into the cytosol of that cell. And then further what happens is those genetic components, they start replicating. Once they replicate, then normally whenever we talk about this whole process, there is replication, then there is transcription, and then there is translation. So once the replication has taken place, then in the third stage, the transcription also starts. That DNA material, that genetic material uncoats, and after that transcription start. And then once this has happened, the viral nucleic acids which are produced, they enter into the nucleus of that host cell. And during this process, how does it enter the nucleus? By hijacking the RNA of the host cell. Once it enters into the nucleus, further all other components are also individually synthesized. And then finally, all these individual units, the capsid part, the genetic material part, the outer covering of that virus, of the protein coat, all this happens and they all get assembled together. So where is all this assembly taking place? Inside the nucleus. Once they assemble together in the nucleus, then these come out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm. Then they attack the plasma cytoplasmic membrane and exit out of that host cell. So once that virus has exited out, now what entered was one viral particle, but what exists out are multiple particles which have been produced by replication. And once they exit out, they break that cytoplasmic membrane and move out, and therefore the host cell dies. This is how the assembly and release takes place. So if we look at this replication process, this entire cycle, first there is attachment, then there is penetration of the viral particle, uncoating of its DNA, then transcription occurs. Inside the nucleus, it penetrates. Then all the genetic components, every component of that viral particle is generated, synthesized separately. Then they come out into the cytoplasm. They get assembled to form the viral particle, and then they are released out of the cytoplasm, killing the host cell. Now, this, whatever we have discussed so far, is what is called as the lytic cycle. Lysis refers to breakdown. So lytic cycle is this what we talked about just now. Here, there is a more detailed explanation of that same thing, where first the bacteriophage, which is the host, which is the bacterial particle carrying the viral particle. So that bacteriophage comes towards the host cell. In this case, we have shown it as if the host is a bacterial cell. So that phage attaches to the surface of the host on the receptor. Then the phage DNA enters inside. Then there is, so this is what is penetration. Then that phage DNA replicates, creates all its components. Then the new phage particles get assembled. And finally, the cell is lysed, the cell is broken, and it releases the new phages. Now, those new phages which are released out, they will go and find more host cells to interact with. Like this, we can see that in this diagram what is shown, one viral cell which came gave us about 7 or 8 new particles. This is just a schematic. Like that, there can be multiple number of new viral particles which get synthesized. So in this lytic cycle, there is immediate replication of that viral cell and there is immediate destruction of the host cell. This is called as the lytic cycle. The other cycle that we talked about, what I told you, is the dormant one. That is called as the lysogenic cycle. So if we look at this first, the topmost part in this diagram, we have a point where this phage carrying, the bacteriophage carrying the virus has come, and that viral material has entered, it has penetrated and it has entered inside the cell, inside the host cell. This, whatever is shown as the red colored strand, that is entering inside. But once it enters inside, what it does is that it just stays there quietly. Now that bacterial host cell, it undergoes cell division. When it undergoes cell division, this viral material, which is dormant, which is latent, it is simply sitting there quietly, that also enters into the daughter cells. So if you look at this diagram where you have a single bacterial cell which divided to give us the two daughter cells, Now, in each of those, a portion of this red filamentous material has entered inside. What is that red material? That indicates the viral genetic components which have gained entry. Now, the minute these two cells have been formed, then if there is some kind of a trigger that, let us say that host cell is deprived of certain nutrients, or there is excessive oxidation, any kind of a stressful situation, stressful condition, what it will do is, at that point of time, this viral material, the viral DNA, which was sitting quietly inside the bacterial chromosome, that gets excised and it moves out. Now, later, it will again enter into new cells. Now, it has moved out of these existing bacterial cells, and it will enter into new cells, and then at some point of time it will again undergo the lytic cycle. So this, what is happening here is that in the lysogenic cycle you have a dormant kind of condition, which when there is specific type of stress which triggers a reaction, at that point it will change over from this lysogenic cycle to the lytic cycle. So in the lytic cycle, we saw that immediately viral replication takes place, and immediately the release of the new viral particles also takes place, and the host cell is immediately destroyed. Here, there is no such immediate reaction. The viral particles will penetrate and enter into the host cell, but it will sit quietly there. Whenever that host cell undergoes cell division, it will also get divided. So it is in a dormant state. It is present in all those daughter cells which have been produced. At a time when there is a particular stressful condition which is created, when there is some kind of a trigger, then it will get activated. And when it gets activated, then it will undergo all the other reactions which happened in the lytic cycle, the previous cycle. So then those DNA particles, then all that viral material which is there will penetrate into the chromosome, into the nucleus of that bacterial cell. Then it will bring about changes. It will undergo replication. It will undergo transcription, translation. Then it will synthesize its own components. Then all those components will come out. They will get reassembled. They will form new viral particles, and at that time they will break the cell and go. Now there is no telling when this will happen. So for years together it may remain in a dormant stage, or for months together it may remain dormant. Sometimes for many years together it may remain dormant, but it is unpredictable. So this is what is about the lysogenic cycle. So first we saw the lytic cycle, and then we are looking now at the lysogenic cycle. I hope you people are able to see the slides which I am showing. Can somebody reply?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. So then we move on to this. Why do we need to do? Now we have seen that because these viruses, this is what is happening to them. This is how the viral replication takes place. So it is very clear to us now that if I want to have a viral cell growth, like when I want to study, right, there may be certain kinds of condition where I need either to isolate and identify the viruses. Like I have a patient who is suffering from some condition. I want to find out what is the viral disease he has. So I need to identify that virus. For that, I may require to study these viruses. Or if I want to study overall the structure of some particular virus, I want to study about its genetic characters, then for that purpose of scientific research, for that I may need viruses. And thirdly, sometimes when we want to prepare vaccines, when we want to produce vaccines in order to give immunity to people, then also we need to have viruses available with us. So now we know, we said that viruses are obligate intracellular parasites. So you cannot grow them in culture media. Like if you want to grow bacteria, you want to grow fungi, what we will do, we have a culture medium which we prepare in the laboratory. Then into that I will inoculate some amount of bacteria or fungus from my standard culture, and then when I allow it to incubate, it will grow. That is how bacterial growth, fungal growth takes place. But because these viruses are obligate intracellular parasites, they will not grow on these culture media. They require living cells to grow on. So if they require living cells, how are we going to cultivate these viruses? For that, the normal procedure is to make use of either animals or embryos or tissue cultures. Now, in the oldest times, the earliest times, the first method which was used was animal inoculation. So in this, what they were doing is that they would use animals as the medium in which they are going to grow these viruses. Now, we said viruses cannot grow in artificial culture media. So they need a living host system. So the very first type of host system which was being used was this animal inoculation. So they were making use of mice, guinea pigs, hamsters, rabbits, many different animals, sometimes dogs also were used, monkeys have been used, right? So like this, they can do the cultivation of the virus inside the animal. So what happens is when we use mice, less than 48-hour-old mice have to be used. Now, what they will do is the viral particles. Shankar, something is happening on the screen. Yeah, these viral particles, they are injected into that animal. Like I have a certain bacteria in which the virus is growing. So I will take a sample from that and it will be injected into this mouse or rat or whichever is my animal. So that injection can be done in two ways, either subcutaneously, just below the skin, or intracranial, into the cranium of that animal. Once that injection is done, what happens is that virus will enter and it will start growing inside that animal. So it leads to the production of tumor cells in that organism. What is that tumor cell? It is because the virus has grown and it has that fourth type that we saw of interaction. So it has led to development of abnormal cells because of the transformation reaction. So then how we can come to know, if we observe that animal, either that animal will die. We have injected our virus into it. Either it will die or it will start showing some lesions. It will be very obvious to us that it has developed some diseases. So that when we find those kind of tumors which are growing there, if we take out a little bit of that tumor from that animal and then we put it into our um, laboratory, what other kind of culture media that we have created, when we extract these things, then we will be able to cultivate that virus there. So actually the virus is growing inside the animal, and then once it has grown, that has led to development of that tumorous thing. And then after that animal dies, or by killing that animal, we can collect those tumorous materials, and from that we can isolate and purify the virus after that animal has died. Now, this was being used for many years, but then there are a lot of ethical issues, and it was also found that if that animal is having a strong immunity, it may not allow certain human viruses to grow in that animal. Moreover, if I want to cultivate and grow viruses which are going to be used for vaccine production, then I cannot use this kind of an animal inoculation method. So now there is almost no usage of this method of animal inoculation. Only if there is absolutely no other method which is available, we make use of this. The second method by which we can do is to make use of embryonated eggs. So this was developed in the year 1931. What is done is 7 to 12-day old chick embryos are taken. You know that when you have an egg, there is actually a chick embryo which is growing inside that egg. So eggs which are about 7 to 12 days old, embryo containing eggs, we take them. Then a certain area of that eggshell is disinfected with iodine. Then we use a sterile drill and we drill a hole into that embryo. After it is made, after that hole is made, whichever this virus I want to grow, I will inoculate that into this egg. Then I will seal that hole which I had created with gelatin or paraffin, and I will incubate this egg at 36 degrees centigrade for 2 or 3 days. After that, when I observe, after 2 3 days, I will notice that there are some pock mark like things or there are some lesions. Then I know that growth has taken place. So, depending on which particular virus I'm growing, this injection of that viral particles can be done into different areas of that egg. Why we are inoculating it into the egg? When that egg is having the chick embryo inside, it's a living system. It's not a dead cell, right? Or it is not an inanimate culture. So in that, the virus will get whatever it requires to grow. So we can inject into different areas as is shown in this diagram. And based on which virus we want to cultivate, we can choose which particular area we want. However, the problem here is that if that egg itself had some infection, then that may interfere with the growth of this virus. Or sometimes, if there are if you don't follow proper procedure, it is likely that when you made the hole and you inoculated the viruses, at that point of time there was some bacterial contamination which happened, and in that case that may kill the embryo itself. So if that chick embryo itself is dying, then your virus is not able to grow in that kind of a medium. So but embryonated eggs are very widely used. Even now we continue to use them because they are not as what you say damaging as the animal inoculation. And now, of late, the most important and most widely used method is cell or tissue culture. So, in this, what we do is whichever cells I want to use as my medium in which I'm growing to grow the viruses, I take up those living tissues and then I use some mechanical shaking procedure or I subject it to some enzyme action so that that tissue gets broken into individual cells. Then once I have broken up all that, I will wash those cells, I will count them, and I will suspend that into a proper growth medium, into a proper culture medium. Then I will put that into separate plastic bottles or into petri dishes and so on. And then what will happen is that the cells, I will provide some kind of a surface. So whether it is the glass bottle or it's a petri dish, there you will notice after some days that the cell starts sticking to that surface, and then it after some days it forms a unique single layer, a mono layer sheet of that virus has grown there. Now, either we can use this method, or sometimes they make use of what are called as drums, roller drums, where the viruses will be growing while those drum-like components are rotating. Anyway, we don't need to get into the details of that. But here, the third method, this cell tissue culture method, is the one which is most commonly used. Whatever virus I want is allowed to grow on that particular tissue culture, so that it is having that tissue which is there is the underlying source material for this virus to grow on. That tissue is a living culture. I mean, it is a living system, and therefore the virus can grow on that. So, this cell or tissue culture method is the one which is most often used nowadays. So, when we say tissue culture, we can have three types of cell cultures. One, firstly, is the primary cell culture, where we take normal cells from animals or humans. Like, for example, the kidney of the monkey, or the human embryonic kidney, or the chick embryo. These can be used as to prepare primary cell cultures. Other type of cultures which can be used, there's something called as a semi-continuous cell culture, where we take diploid cells. Now these may be obtained from the human embryonic lung or from the rhesus monkey, from the embryo cell of the rhesus monkey. And the third category of cell culture that we can have is called as a continuous cell line. So this continuous cell line is basically cancerous cells, because we know that cancer cells, they indefinitely go on replicating, right? There is a strong level of growth in these cancer cells. They go on proliferating indefinitely. So if you regularly subculture those cells and you store them at minus 70 degrees centigrade, then it is possible to have an indefinite supply of those cancer cells. However, again, we need to remember that if I'm going to use cancer cells as the source in which the virus is going to grow, then obviously that kind of a cell culture cannot be used if I want to produce vaccines. If I want to produce viruses which are going to be used for my studies, or I'm going to produce viruses to find out some genetic character of that virus, that and all is okay. I can grow them in the cancer cells. But if it is that I want to grow the viruses to produce some vaccine, I cannot use continuous cell lines. I have to use either primary cell cultures or semi-continuous cell cultures. So whenever I'm growing the viruses, I need to find out whether they have really grown or not. So there are different ways in which we can do. The first thing is that we can observe the cytopathic effects. That if the virus is growing, then there will be certain kind of morphological changes in those cells which I can observe. That can be seen. Cytopathic. something which is dangerous, damaging to the cell. So some kind of a damage of the cell will take place, and that will manifest as a morphological change. I can observe that. Second thing is that some kind of metabolic inhibition will take place. The normal cells would have been producing acid, but when virus starts growing there, it will halt, it will stop the production of acid. So if I find that the acid production has greatly decreased or it has stopped, I know that my viral cells are growing there. Similarly, mm, the other thing is that as the virus starts to grow, RBCs will start sticking to the surface of the infected cells. So if my virus is growing, I want to check whether virus is growing, I can put some small amount of red blood cells into that culture. And if it starts to absorb on the surface, then I know that virus growth is taking place. Similarly, we can also have some kind of transformation. Like if you are growing cancerous, cancer causing viruses, then what they do is they will start piling up together and they'll start producing small tumors here and there. So that kind of a transformation can show us that virus is growing. Then I can also take a small sample of that and stain it using certain chemicals, and I can observe under the microscope. It will show me particular kinds of colors. We don't need to know the details. They have given an example here, but we don't need those details. Anyway, by observing under the microscope, we can make out virus is growing or not. And lastly, we can use techniques like immunofluorescence, where if the virus is growing well, it will be producing certain viral antigens. So if you add some fluorescent antibodies, what will happen is there will be this antigen antibody reaction. And that, if you observe under the microscope and you see that this antigen antibody reaction has taken place, then you know that virus has grown. Because only when the virus grows, it will produce those viral antigens. So these are the different techniques by which we can detect whether viral growth has taken place. So these are all the things that we covered in the session today. So we talked about how, firstly, viruses don't go undergo cell division. Their multiplication is not by cell division like bacteria and fungi, but each viral component is separately synthesized. Then it is assembled together to create a new viral particle. And we said that it cannot happen independently. It cannot happen in artificial culture media because viruses are obligate intracellular parasites. Then we talked about the 4 types of virus host interaction. First is when it gets virus will be destroyed. Virus will destroy the host cell. Second is the virus gets destroyed. Third, the virus will enter the host cell, but it will not destroy it at that point of time. It will just stay in a dormant state. At some other time, when the triggers are there, that time it will destroy the host cell. And fourth, we said transformation, where there is conversion of the normal cell into a cancerous cell because of the virus. Then we talked about how this actual replication takes place. And in that, we saw this lytic cycle and we talked about the lysogenic cycle. Then we said that why we need this viral cultivation for clinical identification of viruses, for scientific research, and to produce vaccine. Then we talked about 3 methods by which this viral cultivation can be done: animal inoculation, embryonated eggs, and cell or tissue culture. So, and we talked about different types of cell cultures. You can have primary cell culture, semi-continuous cell culture, and continuous cell culture lines. And we talked about how we can, once we are doing the cultivation of the virus, how do we make out that we are successful? How can we make out whether virus has actually grown or not? So by monitoring cellular changes, by monitoring some other parameters, we can make out whether the virus cells are growing or not. Okay. So generally this part about viral replication and viral cultivation, it comes in either the 5 marks part or in the 2 marks section. So anyway, I will be sending across the notes in this presentation. If you want, you let me know. I can send you these PPTs also. But the way in which these PPTs are made, at least this particular one, the other ones were different, but this one at least is mostly based on whatever I generated from AI using my notes that I have. So it is giving you a picture of it, but you can't really write from this in your answers. So I have the set of notes which I have for this chapter. I'll send that also to you, and from that you can read and see, and you'll have to write your answers from that notes itself, because this will not be able, you will not be able to really write anything from this presentation. So anyway, so this part about what we have talked today is viral cultivation and before that we talked about viral replication. Okay, so hopefully with this we have completed our set of online classes. Mostly from Monday we will be able to continue with our schedule of normal theory classes. Let us see, they will inform you what is the schedule next. Okay, so then we can go back to that situation. Okay, thank you very much everybody for attending. As usual, I will be I have recorded this, so I will be putting it up later, the link, so that those who couldn't attend, couldn't join online, they will be able to do it. Thank you.